Tonight's regular meeting of council to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of May 28th, 2018 be adopted as presented. Today is not May 28th, 2018, actually, is it? June 11th. I'd like to make one amendment, which is to just move the annual report 5C to the beginning of the presentation. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of May 14th, 2018 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 14th, 2018 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Discussion. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And item 3C, recommendation that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of May 14th, 2018 be received. Moved by Councillor Ranhawa, seconded by Councillor Moreau. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up we're going to have our annual report by the city manager.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that there was a typo. It should have been May the 28th for all three of those recommendations.
Okay, that's what was going on.
If you look at the attachments, they are dated May 28th.
Okay. Seeing as it's clerical, we'll make sure to include those in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Push the green button. I've watched people from over there. I apologize for everyone who's in the audience who probably didn't come to watch me or hear me do the annual report, but it's scintillating, so I hope you enjoy it. So as part of our requirement under the Local Government Act and the Community Charter, we're required to do an annual report and a presentation to council with basically what has the city been up to for 2017. I'm going to go a little bit off script. I'm going to talk a little bit more about things that have been going on a little bit longer than 2017 because I've just passed my five-year anniversary date in May, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been up to as your city manager for the last 5 years, but this really is an official presentation for 2017. Wrong, there we go. So the annual report must include an audited financial statement, a list of permissive tax exemptions, reports and progress report on municipal services and operations for the year, as well as objectives for 2018. Any declarations of disqualification under section 111 not applicable, so we didn't have any. So that's the legal stuff. Nice picture of an eagle though. So an overview. Annual report includes letters from the mayor and the city manager, council profiles and 2018 council meeting schedule, organizational chart, reports from all city departments except from or excerpts from the community charter, audited financial statements, permissive tax exemptions, community enhancement grants, and contact information. So you can see on the left hand side there's a number of sort of ways in which we understand who we are and try to make meaning of our community through the numbers. So as of the last census, we were 11,733 people. We actually think there's more people here, but we're not going to argue with the federal census. We had a number of open sessions co-hosted by Pembina on what's going on Watson Island. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Increase in oh yeah, something I don't know a lot about, but our Facebook page says we have way more likes than we used to have. And means what? They like us more than they used to? Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Anyway, so there's a number of pieces of information there. They're too small for anyone to read, so we'll move on. We have a little video. So you can see Watson Island, there's pretty well not much left there now. And it's actually less now than when this picture was taken about a month ago. We co-hosted the open house with Pembina to provide information on the city's development plans on Watson Island. We did phase 1 of our water project. We put a new line in from the old dam all the way down to Schwatlands. LED lights. So new washrooms out in the arena. Court flooring. Installation, accessible lifts at the aquatic center. Online registration. Video surveillance, which I think is great because now we're actually video surveilling the cops. Continued 3rd Avenue sidewalks, paving 3rd Avenue. All will remember that. Wonderful. That we didn't take long before we dug it up. Is Richard here? We repaved some of the industrial park entrance. Utility improvements on 7th Avenue East. All that drive by there will remember that. Several roads, waterline repairs. It seems to be what we do all the time now is repairs since our infrastructure is so old. New Mariners Park, which I think turned out great, although the green and red starboard and forward are on the wrong sides. So you've got to work on that. Planting trees. Oh look, Paul's in here. With love, Prince Rupert. And we're doing a full tsunami hazard assessment to find out how far the water can come up. New pumper truck. If you guys really have some spare time, I would encourage you to go and look at our Go map. It's fantastic. And of course, the trail, the Rustburg Trail, which may one day have bridges and may actually be officially open. So you can see these are partnerships where we work with other members of the community to try and get community improvements done. You can go to our website and review our budget. And we're looking forward to another year when the sun comes out like that picture. I'm trying to be as entertaining as I know the mayor is going to be about 2030. Yeah, probably not, huh? Maybe not. Thanks, Barry. So highlights. Awarded the tsunami. We did the 3rd Avenue paving. We negotiated a new QP contract. Participated in negotiations of negotiated Ridley Island tax sharing agreement with a provincial facilitator. Initiated phase 1 of the water project. You saw a picture of that. Developed phase development plan for Watson Island. Held an open house. Positive investment decision with Pembina. Engaged the province around provisions for of land for supportive housing, which will be proceeding here shortly. Down on Park Avenue. Continue renovations of the rec complex. Obviously the court, flooring, LEDs, accessibility lifts, etc. So so 5 years ago when I first started, it was apparent to me that we were, let's just say, financially challenged with the things that we had. Council had worked hard, I think, over the intervening years trying to reduce the amount of expenditures, but the expectations of the community was that we continued to have a number of public services, and so it was my job early on to try and look for ways, not so much to reduce our expenditures, but look for ways to increase our revenues. So one of the things that we've been doing in the last number of years is focusing on getting grants and donations, working in partnership with senior governments and other organizations and agencies. So we basically have over the last 4 years accumulated $16.5 million in grants and donations that have gone to a whole series of studies and things that we needed to do, and engagement with the public on redesign. So a few park improvements, obviously the water supply, focusing on our important underground infrastructure, which always is hard to convince the public is a good thing to spend money on, because it's actually under the ground. Obviously the new Cal Bay Marina and the breakwater, airport renovations and improvements, certainly some recreation improvements were all well supported. So doing more with less. So this is where I came in. Basically early on my tenure, I started negotiating with ExxonMobil, and I was able to get an $18 million lease option for our Lot 444, 2,200 acre parcel just north of town. And so we basically formed what we call Legacy Inc., which is a kind of like a holding company wholly owned by the city of Prince Rupert, and as a place for us to put the capital that we were earning on some of our pieces of privately held property, to make sure that those revenues would go back into the city's budget by way of dividends, which happened. We are now working with Pembina Pipelines Corporation on Watson Island. We hope to have that complete. They've gone to FID already, but we hope to have that that project generating a revenue for the city, a revenue, taxes, and will help our revenues. And obviously there's other industrial activity or industrial interest in Prince Rupert area with some of the other pieces of property that the city owns, which I'm now talking to other proponents, and we hope to generate quite a bit more money in the future. We've tried to seek common ground with some of our other community partners, such as Port Ed. We were able to get them to arrange $500,000 in a service agreement in 2016 and 17. We're still debating our tax transfer to them. This at least was a bit of a reprieve for those 2 years. And one of the early negotiations I did when I first came, with great help from Corinne, was the Port of Prince Rupert's settlement of our outstanding dispute over payment in lieu of taxes for $5.3 million. So we've worked with as many as the organizations we can to try and solve some of our revenue shortfalls, to be able to continue to deliver the kind of level of public service that Rupertites would like to enjoy. So let's talk a little bit about Watson Island, because it's an interesting island. It has a tremendous history in Prince Rupert. The city has been tied to Watson Island in many different ways for many years, first generating a substantial tax revenue in the early years, then subsequently failing, and us ending up with the property at tax sale because basically nobody else wanted it. It was an environmental liability. One of the other issues that we did here at the city was work with Sunwave to develop a settlement agreement. We subsequently removed most, as you can see from the picture, most of all of the superstructure on Watson Island. We removed all the pulping chemicals. The island is basically inert. There's nothing there now that could damage the environment. We attracted a proponent, and we will generate substantial future lease revenues and tax revenues on 30 acres of a 250 acre site. And there is all kinds of other future trade opportunities for Watson Island, given that it has water, road, and rail access to the site. It's been probably that has taken up almost most of my time here as a city manager, is trying to find our way through a successful outcome for Watson Island, and with ongoing support from council. I know the mayor and I have spent many hours trying to make Watson Island into a success again for this community, and I think we've rounded that corner, and I'm proud of the work that everyone has done. All of the staff here have worked diligently, unbelievable hours, weekends, nights, to try and get Watson Island back on into some kind of productive role for the community. One of the, and we'll talk a little bit about the staff. One of the more important things, I think, for any municipality is to build your human capital, build your ability to really deal with the challenges that come by. Things change all the time. We've developed a program to attract and repatriate and retrain our staff. There's a few of them here that were born and brought up here, went away, got educated, and have come back to work for us with a real big heart and real concern for the future of this community. And that probably is the single most important thing that we've done as a team here to actually give Prince Rupert a tremendous future by investing and being supportive of our young staff members who already are invested in the community. We're, I think, allowing ourselves to have a tremendous positive future going forward. And what I've tried to do with respect to that is change the way I see the world, to be able to look through the eyes of millennials to see why the world is changing, and I have a couple of feet in an old tar pit. So, as the dinosaur in the place, I have been changed by many of the younger people in our organization with some new and very progressive ideas. And to try to stay with that, I've tried my best to build a supportive work culture. Certainly we have a lot of fun working here. We enjoy ourselves, and everyone who works here sees this more as a calling than as a job. This is working to better our community in every way. And I know we have some really fun debates about whose opinion about what's better for the community we should follow, but it's a tremendous working environment. And I think as a result of that, happy people actually do more work than people that are unhappy. That's my thesis. I'm not sure that that's probably provable, but so we pursued partnerships and grants and funding opportunities to support community projects. And the mayor received a letter the other day, and I handed it out to council, but I just wanted to go over it because this is indicative of how our staff feel about what they do here for the city. This is from a lady, I won't use any names, but this is from a lady who sent us a letter, expressed her gratitude and thanks to our city employees. They were here for a 50-year reunion. They went out to the cemetery to find some of their relatives. Couldn't find them. They came back to City Hall. One of the clerks helped them, sent them back out there again. They still couldn't find the right headstone. And when they were out there, somebody helped them, went and found the headstone, cleaned it up, and they were so appreciative. They've sent this email off, and I think this says it all. The city of Prince Rupert is very fortunate to have dedicated employees like the ones that they interacted with. So I think that that's just indicative of the attitude and the approach that city staff are taking now. They're engaged. We have encouraged Public Works to talk to people on the street, explain what it is you're doing, so that the public who's paying for all this understands exactly what's going on. And I'm going to apologize right up front that we're going to be detoured for a number of weeks now because of another water break. But everyone will smile at you as you detour. How about that? So That's just what happens when you're in our world. So, for the full details and the full 2017 annual report will be available online and at City Hall for public review. And we will have a couple of dates where you can comment on that. June 25th at the Committee of the Whole, you can comment on our annual report, and the final consideration for the annual report will take place after that. So with that, I know everybody wasn't here to hear this, but thank you. I think the staff thanks council for all your ongoing and continued support of our work, and we do absolutely the best we think we can to try and better this community. And I think we've been more and more successful, and with the attitude that I see amongst our team, that's going to continue. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Questions from council?
That's not why you sit here. You get up and leave right away.
Well, I'll just say great job, by the way, and great job because I think it shows that there's a culture shift happening here at the city, and that everyone's been working hard on that, and we appreciate everything the staff does and all the work that's being done on the ground.
Thank you.
Okay, so recommendation that council by resolution approve the circulation of the 2017 annual report and set the date of June 25th, 2018 for the public meeting on the annual report. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next up, it's a night of presentations, by the way. Presentation by myself and Ken Shaw from the Northwest Community College regarding the 2030 Sustainable City Policies.
Welcome. It's just the green button there.
Okay, I think this is the first time I've been on this side of the table. So, I'm here with Ken Shaw. Ken Shaw is a professor at the Northwest Community College. Ken also has a master's in bioresource engineering, as well as a certified permaculture expert. Back in, can't even remember the date now, but I think it was 2016, we created a committee, a mayor select standing committee, essentially a research committee, to really look into what sustainable policy development could look like in the city of Prince Rupert. And we've met on many occasions as a small group of just about 4 people who have some expertise in sustainable policy development. And so what we're going to do here today is essentially outline what we are calling our draft of the first installment, and outline what the process looks like next and what we've kind of come up with. So first, I've done a lot of research myself before I was the mayor, but also while I have been the mayor. I've been appointed to the BC Municipal Climate Leadership Council, which is run through the Community Energy Association. It's a group of mayors and councillors across BC that work on policy development for the BC government and community development. We meet on a quarterly basis through telephone conferences, and then we have an annual meeting with the Minister of Environment every year at the UBCM every September. And so I've been doing a lot of consulting with the group on some of the plans that we have initiated here in Prince Rupert. I've also just recently been appointed to the Highway 1697 Electric Vehicle Charging Network Advisory Committee. We got a $125,000 grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the FCM. And that committee is going to be also run through the Community Energy Association. As council will remember, our manager of certificate innovation came forward with the community energy planning process back, I believe, in November. The Community Energy Association ultimately helps municipalities with climate planning and policy development and district energy heating and things like that. And so what I've been doing is trying to get myself involved with those in the field and to get first-hand knowledge from other people that are moving forward on some of these initiatives to ensure that whatever we do come up with in Prince Rupert is scaled to Rupert's context, but is also grounded in real research. I've also attended a few conferences. I went to the Renewable Cities Conference last year, also the Climate Leadership Conference, and met with experts from around the world that are doing things in places like Brazil and Sweden, and getting a better sense of how that all can look. Recently went down to City Studio Conference, the Art of Cities Conference, to look at innovation models and really partner with the North Coast Innovation Lab on bringing a model close, which also has a lot to do around public engagement and getting people to build things from the ground up. And last is there's a program through FCM. The FCM has a green infrastructure fund, and essentially a lot of the things that we would like, what we want to do with this policy thing, there's a lot of funding available through the FCM, and that a lot of this can be done with grants and can be done in a way that doesn't necessarily impact taxpayers. So every time I go to Ottawa, I meet with the FCM and meet with their green team and basically go through the programs and understand exactly how those applications work and what those requirements are, and we've been lining up a list of those funding options.
So Prince Rupert's not the only community that's been looking at sustainable policies. We're definitely not a leader. We have many communities around North America that have been working on this. Vancouver has been since 2011, I believe, on the Greenest City initiative. Seattle was recently voted the most sustainable city in the U.S. And Portland, they have their sustainability task force. Other cities that have lots of money, like City of Victoria, but other smaller cities in the north, say, Terrace has their sustainability planning department. Smithers, they have a plan. Even Telkwa does. And really innovative places like Surrey, they have their charter as well. So there's been a lot of work that's been done out there. We don't have to invent things from scratch. So we have a pretty good sense of what policies need to be developed and where people have gone with this. There's a variety of different models, and so we looked at that to see what might fit Prince Rupert.
So ultimately, this committee, the first phase, was really a research committee, contacting other communities, gathering information, really getting the base knowledge in place so that a framework could be established, which is essentially what we're bringing out today is the framework of something that could be built upon, and at the end I'll talk about what the next steps are. But essentially some of the categories that it covers is policy development around local food development, local energy development, transportation initiatives, waste management, waste diversion, and neighborhood development, placemaking, things like that, which we'll get more into detail here. So first we'll start with energy, and just so folks know, it's this document, and you'll be able to get this off the city website, and you'll be able to look more specifically at what the policies look like. But essentially we're looking at, for example, energy production, energy mode shifting, and energy conservation and efficiency policies that can really help us with new economic development opportunities, new jobs, new types of industries that could emerge here. For example, there's been already tidal generation assessments done in Prince Rupert on Butsy Rapids, as well as other areas where the tides come in and out. There's already an assessment being done right now on Mount Hayes for the Seabreeze wind turbine plan, as well as our water dam, looking into energy production through hydroelectric capacity through the dam that we already have to replace for our water. And so the policy objectives essentially outline how we could potentially support these initiatives, how we can support, for example, things like LEED certified buildings, which are like an energy matrix around how to develop buildings that get a certain rating around passive designs and different local sustainable materials, and how we could maybe as a city start working towards developing those as future building replacements and things like that. And so energy is one key component of the policy objectives.
So I'll talk about food, one of the things I'm passionate about. not just eating it, but growing it. And I just kind of wanted to sort of comment about these green policies. Sometimes people think it's just about community gardens and maybe backyard hens and little things like that. Maybe fruit trees on 3rd Avenue or kind of window dressing type stuff. But I really want to sort of point out that these policies are really about economic development and innovation. And a sustainable committee in all these categories is very innovative and economically diverse. Okay, we're not relying on just one thing. And this is number up here. According to Stats Can, in 2013, that the average Canadian spends $287 a month on food. And I don't know what your food bill's like, but I think that's a pretty low number. And so, you start doing some math and you multiply it by how many people are in Prince Rupert, and you go, oh, that's like $50 million a year. That's $50 million a year we shell out of our wallet, heads on down the highway. And if we look at the population of our region, stretching to Smithers, that's like $274 million, $250 million. And those that study economics know that about the multiplier effect, that food production is up there with mining and forestry and sort of primary industries. And so you start to think about, well, if you produce food locally, that generates a lot of economic activity. And the multiplier effect for food is estimated around 7 to 12 times. And so, continuing with the math exercise here, that means, if we produced every bit of food in Prince Rupert, that would be a $329 million business. Or for the whole region, $1.9 billion for Terrace, Prince Rupert, Haida Gwaii, and Smithers. And it's like, well, that's a lot of money. And you say, well, that's ridiculous. You can't grow bananas here, and I like to eat oranges, so you're just dreaming Technicolor. So then I sort of throw it back and say, well, what about 10%? Is 10% a pretty reasonable number? And that means $38 billion of business, $1 million for Prince Rupert, or $190 million for our region. And then you start to look at these numbers and go, there's some major economic development policies here. And then I contrast, I like to call this kind of like the food mega project, because in the north here we're pretty fond of mega projects. They come and go. But I'd like to point out that people are actually sitting on top of one and we don't even know it. And when I look at the stats, the BC agriculture industry it's about $13 billion a year. It employs almost 63,000 people. And then I checked out, you remember Pacific Northwest? They were $36 billion, and they were going to have 330 people once it was all built and done. So I think there's some real economic development possibilities around this. And so, so when we talk about food, we don't want to think just backyard hens, hanging baskets with strawberries in, stuff like that. We also want to think about large-scale food production. It might be out in the industrial site. There's lots of area in towns. I'd be glad to do a workshop and a presentation on what other communities do and how we don't have huge fields here, but there's a lot of ways that food can be produced. So when we get to policies and we talk about school gardens, the work that Charles Hayes does, the Overlook Garden Project that we received funding for, what's gone on at McKay Street, what Annunciation School is talking about. Those are little things, but they help shape people's focus and start to think in different ways. And so a local food industry becomes possible when people have that kind of experience. And this really, if we go to the next slide, feeds straight into what you want to have happen along the economy. We want a diverse local economy. We want to have those dollars recirculate. And food is just one example of it. And so a sustainable community is also a very economically diverse and resilient community. And all we got to do is to start changing in how we spend our dollars. And that doesn't require a big shift.
So to add to that, so in this section we're looking towards things like startup incubators, maker spaces, helping social enterprises get started up that are focused around local economic development or in a sustainable way. So new types of industries, new types of jobs. We've a lot of this too was also designed around Councillor Moreau's policy objectives around the Small Business Committee, and understanding that there's a challenge with our downtown, and perhaps we need to start creating new types of businesses, new types of industries in the community. So that's also what part of the policy development is looking towards. What is the new economy looking like, and how do we shape that together? Another key point, which is a part of our GHGs, is the vehicle emissions and transportation. And so our policies are focusing around different types of transportation modes. As I mentioned, we're trying to get an electric vehicle charging network from Haida Gwaii to Kamloops established through 5 regional districts, which could look like potentially every 60 kilometers a charging station being set up along the highways and the communities all along the line, so that there is a new opportunity for, say, electric buses, electric transportation, setting up the infrastructure so that these things can actually emerge. Part of it is also looking at potentially electrifying part of our fleet, or partnering with other organizations in town to share those costs. The other part of it too is a walkability, transportation for bikes, street improvements, as well as helping facilitate the Canadian Trail Society, helping as best as we can to create an integrated trail network. Their master plan, help be a partner with that so that you can get around the town on a bike or walking, so that there is other options. So the policy development really focus around how do we reduce GHGs and also increase participation in transportation in the community. Another key part is waste. As we all know, our landfill is getting full. It's going to cost roughly $9 to $10 million to upgrade the cell, as we outlined in the Haze 2.0 blueprint presentation. And ultimately, the best way to reduce waste is to have waste diversion, and to be able to do things like organics, community composting, things like that. One of the things we were going to move forward on this year as a council was curbside recycling, so that recycling can be easier in the community. Unfortunately, the grant fell through for that, but we're working on a new grant, hopefully to have that happen in 2019. And so basically waste, and also what we need to do with our waste treatment. We need to move forward on that, and so all about ensuring that we have a sustainable long-term view around how we want to manage waste in this community.
So the final part of it is neighborhoods, and so creating a sense of cohesion. So rather than just a city of Prince Rupert, we're a city of villages, and so that we have a pride in local neighborhoods. There's been some discussion about the use of vacant lands, places that create gathering space, and when you have connections between neighbors, you begin to have neighborhood pride, and we've I've seen that in a few areas in the city where it's kind of emerged sort of organically, and we want to encourage that as well. People will look after the community, they'll make it look nicer, and all those things reduce crime, make streets safer.
So a good example of that is McKay Street Park. McKay Street Park process was exactly the type of thing we're trying to create here around these policies. Is we knocked on all the doors in that neighborhood many times, actually, got all the kids involved that were living there to be a part of the process of designing and creating the McKay Street Park. We worked with 7 different organizations in the community to really start honing in down on that neighborhood, as it's one of our more harder hit neighborhoods since the economic collapse in 2000. And ultimately design a process that got everybody to buy in, and then we got a part of a contest to win $100,000, which got the community rallied. And it might just be a little part to other people, but it's all about the process of how it was created from the bottom up, and it's something I know council here supported, and so did our union. So thanks to them, we were able to really deliver on that, and I know that's going to be open soon once the final safety checks are done. And so that's just a key example of what we're talking about here. And so we could look at different clusters of neighborhoods and help facilitate those neighborhoods to start creating their own identities. And there's a few neighborhoods in town that already still have block parties, and really bring back that neighborhood space feeling, through placemaking and other initiatives. And also part of the policy development here is the downtown beautification stuff, which essentially echo the policies that Councillor Moreau and his committee designed and presented to Council last month. So this will be available to look online. So I just want to talk about the next steps here. So one thing about this is why we call it 2030 Sustainable City. Although there's some imperative around climate change, we also have to look at the reality of city budget and city process. And so we have some immediate challenges that we face, which I've outlined in the Hayes 2.0 blueprint. And so I want to keep a good pace with this this document. And so the intention here today is to have council essentially see this as a draft. And see it as something. Now what I would like to do next is bring this into the public, and I would like to be able to design a public engagement strategy for this. What I've already been thinking about is potentially hosting roundtable discussions on each one of these policy topics on different nights throughout 2019. And having the community come together and help co-create the policies. So these are just basically a framework to work from, and then we want to build upon this with the community, with council, with city staff, and ultimately build out a policy development book that really sets a framework to enable a new culture of new economy to emerge in Prince Rupert. So not necessarily saying the city is going to do all this stuff and spend billions of dollars developing this. It's more about how do we set up the right policies to allow the community to start doing some things themselves. How do we enable community gardens in certain locations? What are going to be our policies around that? What is going to be our policies around backyard hens and things like that, right? And rather than looking them as in silos, this is all about creating the frame. I also want to acknowledge that the city did council back in 2009-10 did create a green task force to try to address these issues, and there was a committee made at that time, and I think the issue was just about process. They brought a bunch of people in the community together to figure out what we can do, and then a diversion of topics emerged where people were kind of going, well, it should be about bike lanes first, and oh, actually it should be about transportation, no, it should be about energy, and there was a lot of sporadic ideas. And so rather than go in that way, what we wanted to do was create a frame to speak from, and then people can build within, because it's such a multifaceted approach. And in other communities, rushing into these things, as much as we have fuzzy thoughts around sustainability, sometimes the operations on the ground are just different from how it all occurs. So we want to make sure that people are happy and pleased about what they see in there. They have their voices heard in this, and that there's buy-in from the community. So what's happening now is that in 2019, the city's going to be moving forward on our official community plan renewal. And so what I want to do is analyze a budget for the public engagement and analyze a budget around the public engagement process with the OCP, because not only do we need to have these included in the new OCP, if council desires, but also the policies that Councillor Moreau's committee has created, the Small Business Advisory Council policies, and the Planning for Major Project policies. So those three policy books all need to come into the new OCP for the OCP to be fully updated into the future. And so that's going to be a big process, about a year and a half. And so essentially what I'd like to do is today's recommendation is to essentially pass this as a draft for a design of a public engagement and a budget around that too, and then have a council workshop to discuss how this can look, and then have council involved with the development of this through the public engagement process. So I'll accept questions now from council.
It's a lot to digest, Brig.
Fantastic. Thanks for all the hard work. It's it's a legacy I'd like to see left for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren if I'm still around when they're born. But the thing is, in the short term, there's things we can do right now, and as you mentioned earlier, it's recycle. You know, like we've got to make recycling easier for people, whether it's a depot downtown, curbside, something like that. And you know, one of the simple little things is right now, if you go to the dump and you have recycle, you pay to take it to the dump. You know, as you come out, you've left recycle there, but now you're paying for that tipping fee. And it's one of those things that, you know, I think as a council we can look at and change. And banning one-use plastics. You know, I've already thought of that. You know, I've posted a couple times. I work on the ocean with the Coast Guard, and we were over in Digby Island, and I probably could have made $10 on water bottles just laying on the beach. You know, it's just amazing what's out there, and just little things, little steps to begin with that we as a council can do that won't cost any money. But we can actually start looking at doing these things and then ease it into the overall plan, because every one of these things you're talking about, there's going to be some real challenges. I know that, especially with growing vegetables. I've tried it and but it's all doable. It's just having the willpower to do it, and if engaging the community like we did with McKay Park is, I think, the right way to go. You get everyone to buy into it, and away you go. So, and thank you very much. I can see a lot of work went into this.
Thanks, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Niche.
Just going to say thank you. Good job. I mean, just an example I thought of, I was out at the landfill one day, and I actually, because I had a trailer, I had to drive into the landfill, right up into the actual landfill itself, not just dump it in the dumpster. And it really opens your eyes when you see how many plastic bags are all over the garbage dump, and because they tend to be the ones that get caught by the wind, and they're hanging out of trees all around the dump, and they're and you know, obviously over the years you see how many towns have started talking about banning plastic bags, and or have done it, and you know, maybe that is somewhere we can, you know, save. I mean, here we are going to spend what, $10 or $15 million having to do a new cell for our landfill. Well, you know, there's a prime example of something that can probably come out of our landfill is all those plastic bags. So you know, that's one thing, and you know, maybe, like I've thought, you know, working on people's houses all the time, there's always you know, sometimes it's a shame to throw something away. And sometimes I find myself being a little bit of a hoarder and saving stuff, but I can only hold on to it for so long. And you know, there's someone out there that wants it, whether they want to use it for crafts or you know, for example, old windows. People love making, you know, picture frames and stuff like that. So you know, maybe creating a space that we can you know, have people bring stuff like that, where they just want to allow someone else to use it without having to pay to throw it in the dump, or throw it in the dump because they just don't want to throw it away, because it has value to somebody but maybe not to them. And I think that's something that I would like to see, you know, just from working on people's houses. I see that all the time. It's I just replaced a bunch of windows in someone's house, and they had no use for these windows. They really didn't have any use other than maybe for a greenhouse, but they were, you know, they just trying to give them away. And I think if we had a space to allow that to happen, it would be, you know, it would be a good thing too, and rather than throwing it in the landfill like most people do.
Thanks, Councillor Niche. Councillor Randawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your presentation. On your finding, when you're looking, did you find any grants or like available for these projects?
Yes, there is actually quite a lot of grants actually available. In fact, the FCM is going to be launching a new program called the Transition 2050, which is about becoming carbon neutral by 2050, and it requires 5 communities to partner to get into the process. They have a program. It's called Partners in Municipal Climate or something like that. I think that's the name of it, where you get rated based on your progress in terms of what you're doing with your plans, energy plans, which is one of our managers does that for us, which was presented in November. And if you get into a level 3 of that, you would then automatically are qualified to do this FCM program. So I've already engaged Smithers and Terrace and Kitimat and ourselves and potentially Hazelton to maybe partner with that. What would happen with that is that it's a 3-year program that the FCM funds. A facilitator comes and you work regionally on implementing these types of policies, and the funding is available for that. But also a lot of the specific projects, they have a variety of different funds that would qualify for this, as well as there are other grants out there in the world too around this stuff. A lot of people there's quite a mandate now to reduce carbon emissions, and so there's a lot of new funding that's been coming online. So in terms of between now and 2010, for example, there's way more funding around this than there was then, and so there's a bigger opportunity. There's a big concern, lots of concerns. For example, you're talking about plastics. I mean, there's an island 3 times the size of France in the Pacific Ocean of plastic, right? And it's all microplastics, and it's getting in the food supply and food chain. Like, there's a big ocean cleanup going on right now. There's, we're not going to solve these huge problems like that, but we can do stuff locally, as you guys were mentioning, to try to do our part in making sure we reduce as best we can those wastes and things like that. So yes, there are definitely funding available. Part of this research was to create a list of those funding opportunities. I've already engaged many of the funders. I've already prepped them that we're moving in this direction, and we're certainly, and in fact the FCM reached out to me to let me know that this program's almost going to be available soon. So they're certainly keeping track of what we're doing, because we want to get on the list for those.
Thanks for doing great job, and looking forward more information and workshops in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Randhawa.
Your Worship, Joy here.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Thorkelson.
I just think it's an excellent report. I particularly like talking about sustainable food and sustainable neighborhoods. I'm glad you included those in there. What I do want to do though is give you a little bit of information about what happened with that last committee. The biggest problem we found with that green plan was 2 things. One, the city in the old green plan had to commit to reducing, the city as a corporation had to reduce our footprint. And then the city, as the city of Prince Rupert, was supposed to reduce its footprint, which meant encouraging our community to reduce its footprint by each individual citizen. What it does, though, it takes a real concerted effort to do that. Terrace had somebody who was in charge of sustainability. We didn't have any money to put a sustainable person in charge of sustainability. So there were a lot of programs that happened that many of our homeowners in Prince Rupert did not take advantage of, and particularly as time passed and homes started selling on the market, and now many homes in Prince Rupert are owned, 2 or 3 homes are owned by the same person. Some of those homes are owned by people who are outside the community, and we have many apartment blocks now owned by corporations outside of our community. One of the big things, if we're going to interest renters and homeowners, whether they live in the community or not, whether they have multiple houses or not, we need to encourage them to take advantage of programs such as the BC Hydro program. And I think that's where that last committee fell apart or didn't reach its goal, was to try to encourage community members into doing their part. And I think that a report like this will just do exactly the same as the last report, and the report prior to that is just going to sit on the shelf unless there is a committee that is struck that is going to be able to function within the city of Prince Rupert, not within the corporate body of the city of Prince Rupert, but within the community of Prince Rupert, to help residents take advantage of individual programs and even for the city to try to sponsor some programs, either through our website, etc., but try to get other corporations to sponsor them. So there was a program for doing small repairs around the house, such as putting in different light bulbs. BC Hydro, I noticed in staying on Vancouver Island in a couple of the motels were all had LED lights, and they had a sticker on the wall saying if you stole the LED lights, you would be stealing from BC Hydro because they came from a grant from BC Hydro. So there were, there's things perhaps that we need to have looked into, and if a committee does not take on that job, then what will happen is this report, unfortunately, will cool its heels. So my advice is that in the future we either hire somebody who's in charge of sustainability, or we get an enthusiastic committee that divides itself up and tries to help residents of our community and outside homeowners to take advantage of the many programs that are available.
Thanks, Councillor Thorkelson, for that. And so the intention then, and that was certainly part of the discussion that this our research group had. FCM also has a grant coming out here shortly too that will fund 80% of a staff's wage for 2 years to help implement these types of processes. They're really on top of making sure to help municipalities on the ground. The FCM's mandate is to help municipalities to do these things, and I don't think this was available at that time when you guys were doing it then. And so the intention here is when we do this public engagement process is exactly that, to form some sort of body that will continue the process, as well as the city, we right now are trying to do revenue generation through Watson Island. We're trying to do our top priorities, which is some of our big infrastructure projects. We know that that's where a lot of our resources are going, but that if there is an ability to, between grants and maybe some community funding, to put into the process so that we can go into an implementation phase so that it doesn't just fall apart on a desk. And that's the other reason why part of the process is to put this through the OCP so that we actually have some bylaw development and enforceable things that we want to meet these objectives. So that's certainly part of the next stage, but it's definitely something I think our committee was super hyper aware of, that without the resource, without the wherewithal, it could potentially just be another piece of paper. And that's kind of why we designed the process the way it is. So we hope that it doesn't go that way, and I've already kind of been engaging different levels of government and the FCM to make sure that we can start getting the money in to do implementation, because as Councillor Cunningham says, there's things we can do right now. We don't have to wait until the end of 2019 to do anything. It's more that, and we are moving on things like the water dam for hydroelectric, and we are moving already on curbside recycling and things like that. But ensuring that there's sustainability around the process too, I think, is also a key element. So thank you for saying that.
All right, well, thanks again, and congratulations and kudos on all your hard work. I just want to echo everything that's been said tonight. It's really exciting to see this progress, and I just want to highlight just one thing that you said there in terms of community buy-in, and I'm going to venture a guess. I think it's obvious to me that on a night when the sun is out on a Monday and council chambers is full, I think you'll be seeing the community engagement that you're looking for in this process. So with that said, the recommendation is that the mayor designs a public consultation process with staff, as well as associated budget costs, to be approved by council at a future council meeting, as well as recommend council workshop before going to public, with a date to be determined by council availability. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Any final discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries. Thanks
Great.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
So just as the mayor's coming back, we'll move on to item 6A. We'll call up the, it's a report from the Director of Recreation and Community Services regarding the selection of contract for the hydro pool rehabilitation.
Now, before you start, if anybody wants to leave, you can leave if you'd like, if you don't want to watch the rest of the council meeting, because I know that you might feel trapped here, but it's normal to leave after the thing you wanted to watch. So I'll let the room shuffle here for a moment.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, let's continue.
So the purpose of this report is to seek City Council approval to award a contract for the hydro pool, the hot tub rehabilitation project in the Earlma Aquatic Center. We've gone through a competitive procurement process. We've gained some proposals, and the project team, in combination with the staff, are recommending that we award the contract to Rupert Wood and Steel Construction. And we need to move forward with the recommendation, or my recommendation is that council approve that recommendation from staff.
Okay, so the recommendation that council approve the recommendation of staff and award the hydro pool rehabilitation project to Rupert Wood and Steel Construction. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion.
Thanks very much for your report. I just want to make a comment here that I'm very glad to see that the lowest compliant bid was a local contractor. So that's great to see.
Councillor Niche.
I was going to say the same thing. Glad to see it's local. Not all the time can we do local. Sometimes it doesn't work. The one thing that I would like to point out, as I was explaining to David there earlier, the Northern View had a online story about this project, and there was something like 58 comments of people's displeasure, mostly of this project. And I just want to try and put out a little bit more information on that story, because I don't think people really understand what's going on here. But the hot tub is having to be replaced, and it's not just putting some new tile on it. It's actually jackhammering the hot tub right out and starting this, maybe even doing some foundation work underneath it. So unfortunately, lots of people seem to think that August is a bad time to close the pool, which is the usual time, which, that's debatable. Some people think that it should be open in the summer. Some people think it should be open in the winter. I won't get into that. But, unfortunately, it is going to be closed for 3 months. But this is a big project, and while it's happening, there is other pieces that will be getting fixed at the same time. You may as well take advantage of this time. So I just wanted to try and stress that this is a major project, and want people to understand why it's getting done, because I think a lot of people just felt that it's it's a 3-month almost maintenance closing, but it's way beyond that. So unfortunately, we had many years of money not being spent on the Civic Center due to budget constraints, and now we're unfortunately paying the price for it, and we're having to do projects a little bit bigger than what we'd like to do. But if we don't do them now, then we will have nothing.
Councillor Cunningham.
Yeah, I spoke to David about this already, and there's a safety factor involved in this too. You can't just leave the pool open and be trying to work someplace else, and that it's the overall picture here. Like Councillor Nice says, it's there's a lot of work to be done in that Civic Center, and it's going to be done a little at a time until it's all back up to snuff. And I think the end product, people will be quite happy with it when it's all said and done. And I like to mirror the thing. I'm glad a local company got it. It's nice to see local companies getting jobs like this, especially bigger jobs like this, and we have the expertise in town to do it, and it's nice to see they're getting it.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a report from the Chief Financial Officer regarding our 2018 monthly variance report.
Thank you. For the end of April, most operating and utility revenues and expenses are on track for this time of year and are within budget. Community members will remember the windstorm experienced in April, which brought down a number of trees. Thankfully, no one was injured, and the only downside, apart from the loss of trees, was the Parks Department incurring additional expense cleaning up after the storm. Capital projects are being implemented as at the end of April. Costs will be accumulating over the course of the summer as the works continue.
Questions from council? Okay. Recommendation that council receive this report for information purposes. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Morrow. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, another report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding the 2017 Statement of Financial Information.
Thank you again. The BC Financial Information Act requires municipalities to prepare a document called the Statement of Financial Information. This document provides additional information beyond that provided in the annual audited financial statements and must be approved by Council before June 30th, 2018. Council is asked to approve the 2017 Statement of Financial Information, thereby fulfilling the requirements of the BC Financial Information Act.
Okay, so recommendation that Council by resolution approve the 2017 Statement of Financial Information. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor Moreau. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, we have a report from our Corporate Administrator. Oh, yeah. Okay. Regarding a vehicle for hire regulation amendment bylaw number 3429, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report to Council is with regards to an amendment to the Vehicle for Hire Regulation Bylaw. Earlier this spring, the RCMP Chief Inspector Blake Ward and Mr. Bill Langthorne, representing Skeena Taxi, presented to Council requesting that the chauffeur's permits, as issued by the RCMP, be altered to allow for the requirement for the police information checks, the PICs, and vulnerable sector VS checks for all vehicle for hire applicants to occur every 2 years instead of on an annual basis as a regular occurrence. The RCMP Chief Inspector Ward presented that the Prince Rupert RCMP, beginning in January of 2018, had aligned their record checks to meet the BC Provincial Policing Model Policy Guidelines on police information checks, and stated that with this more fulsome records check process now in place, that he would support this initiative. Staff did check with a number of other communities within the province, and most have this 2-year provision of records checks in place at this time. The only amendment to the Vehicle for Hire bylaw is for item number 16, which is entitled Chauffeur's Permits, which, if the bylaw is passed, would state that every driver shall hold a valid chauffeur's permit issued by the Chief of Police in accordance with Section 36 of the Motor Vehicle Act, regardless of whether the vehicle for hire is a motor vehicle or not, and shall have it displayed within their vehicle for hire at all times when operating a vehicle for hire. The chauffeur's permit shall be issued subject to the discretion of the RCMP's local policies for a maximum of 2 years duration between permit renewals. Both the RCMP and Skeena Taxi are in favor of this change. Staff would ask that Council give first and second readings to the bylaw amendment. Prior to proceeding further with third reading and adoption of the amended bylaw, the City is required by Section 59(2)(b) of the Community Charter to provide an opportunity for persons who consider they are affected by the bylaw to make representation to Council. This will run for 2 consecutive weeks in the local newspaper, following which any feedback provision will be presented to Council prior to having a third reading of the bylaw amendment. At this time, staff would request that Council introduce and give first and second readings to the Vehicle for Hire Regulation Bylaw Amendment number 3429, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandrick. So the recommendations that Council introduce and give first and second readings to the Vehicle for Hire Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 3429, 2018. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Discussion? I'll just say I'm very pleased to see the RCMP and the taxi companies aligned, and that there was synergy with the solution. And so I'm happy to move this recommendation forward due to those reasons. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. We'll grab Councillor Randhawa back. Okay, next we have a report from our Chief Elections Officer, Ms. Bombin. We wear many hats in this organization. Regarding the elections voting procedure and automated vote counting system authorization bylaw number 3428, 2018. Oh.
Thank you. So before I speak to the report to Council, I'd like to provide some general information. The general local election, which includes the general school election, will be held on Saturday, October 20th, 2018. The election is for the positions of mayor, council, and school trustees. There are a number of brochures available at City Hall outlining what the election is and key dates, who can vote and how to register, things to consider in deciding to run for local office, and information for candidates. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has compiled some short videos located on their website under Thinking of Running for Local Office. I will show the shortest of them now as an example, which runs almost 4 minutes. So I think everybody's almost presented out now, so I'll try and go fast.
What are the characteristics of an effective, locally elected official? Attending meetings, sitting on committees, and making decisions on the community's behalf are just some of an elected official's responsibilities. Effective elected officials are those who have a wide range of knowledge, life experiences, and skills to bring to the council or board table. They have an understanding of their community's issues, so they are informed and open to differing perspectives. They understand the role of an elected official and the procedures and legislative rules that apply to local governments. They
We're watching a video right now.
Are honest and demonstrate strong ethical principles. And they understand that a healthy democratic local government needs committed, ethical, and informed elected officials.
If you're going to be a politician, you have to represent everyone, from a student to an older person, rich and poor, and businesses, small and large. But you have to be open to listening and having that dialogue.
I think I've become more patient over time, and that helps when you're working around a council table with people working through tough issues and trying to understand where each other are coming from.
Developing those active listening skills are really important.
It's often seen as very intimidating at the very beginning to take on roles of leadership. But if you've been elected, or even if you haven't been elected and you're appointed to a position in a committee, your job is to help create the foundation and like the environment for a good decision.
People who are the most effective in elected office are those who are accountable to the council or board and to the community. They're also accountable for their own conduct. Proactive in addressing community and council and board issues by finding collective solutions and making informed decisions. Being prepared for meetings, asking questions, and participating respectfully in discussions.
There's a lot of talk about when you run for elected office that you need to have a thick skin, that you're going to hear a lot of criticisms and things that are tossed your way. But instead what I found is you really need a permeable skin, so you let the right information in and you keep the unnecessary information out.
So I come to this from communications, and it's the part of the role that I enjoy the most, and certainly there are some skills that I've learned over time around how to bring people into the conversation, but also how to handle people when they come at you with really strong emotions and really strong opinions, how to metabolize that without taking it on necessarily.
And in fact, I would say to be curious about what people think and why they might think differently than you.
Take a moment to assess how you demonstrate these characteristics. Are they traits that come naturally to you, or will you need to work to build and maintain them? What are your strengths, and how will they help shape the way your local government moves forward if you are elected?
I think it's really important to ask yourself why it is you want to do this and what it is you want to bring to your community. Knowing that there's going to be opposition, knowing that you need an open mind and you might need to adjust your thinking a little bit.
Because if we can appreciate different perspectives and differing perspectives, then I think we'll be better as a council, as a governing body, but most importantly better as a community as a whole.
Okay, and, oh, definitely don't need that. Whoops. Just back out of that, sorry. Okay, and for more information, on the local election, including local government, school trustee, and elections registration and financing. Electors and potential candidates can see these particular websites. And finally, here's the contact information for your local elections officials for this year's election. All of the information will be on our website as well, and more information as it's prepared and made available through the ministry will be provided as well. So as mentioned in the presentation, the general local election is coming up on Saturday, October 20th, 2018. This is a change from prior local elections, which were held the third week of November. As such, a bylaw related to this local election must be passed by July 9th. The proposed bylaw incorporates the defined advance voting opportunities under the Local Government Act. The first advance voting date is October the 10th, and the second is October the 17th. Other items covered in the bylaw are the procedures associated with the election and the use of the automated vote tabulator, the order of names, the use of the provincial voters list, and the resolution in the event of a tie after judicial recount. Council is asked to repeal the previous bylaw and give first, second, and third readings to the new elections bylaw.
Great, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that Council repeal City of Prince Rupert General Local Election Bylaw number 3385/2016 and all other bylaws and amendments, and that Council give first, second, and third readings to the Elections Voting Procedure and Automated Vote Counting System Authorization Bylaw number 3428/2018. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, reports or inquiries from members of council. Anybody else have another presentation they'd like to make? Councillor Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the last week CFest, I like to thank all the organizers and volunteers for doing a great job for another CFest. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Other reports from council? Councillor Cunningham.
While I was down on the waterfront on Sunday, I took a look at the VIA building there. It's in deplorable shape, but I also learned today that there's been an inquiry about buying it via one of the real estate agents in town, and no one from City Hall's got back to her, so if it's just a slip through the cracks or something like that, I'd like to see it addressed if possible, because it'd really be nice to find an investor for that and fix it up, make a Mr. Mike's out of it or something. Maybe even put a community office in there or something, but it's just it's getting to the point now, I think, where it's going to be just about ready for a teardown. It is a historical building, so I'd just like us to inquire and find out what's going on.
Sure, that can be done. Other reports from council? Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks for coming out, everyone.